Welcome back to another video. I'm here at Ravenwood. We're completing the workshop and my capstone timber framing process. This is how we did the roof. So for the spacing, we went with a 16 on center, which I marked out on all the beams on the top. And once those lines were in square, what we did was we had these rafters on the right side of the line running all the way down to the other rafters, which were placed on the left side of the line. The outside piece to our rafter will run flush with the outside of the beam, but those rafters have to be made with a butt joint, that way you can keep them running flush all the way. When you're working with green lumber, you got to make sure to throw that plywood on as soon as possible so they don't get all squirrely on you within a few days, because they're going to start drying out. Okay, so we're up here on the roof. This is half of the roof done. We got our ice and water vapor shield on. To do that, we rolled it out and we measured with how much overhang we wanted on both ends. And once we got our first row up and square, the rest of it went up pretty fast with just a lip of overlap. If the sheet didn't make it all the way in one run, we came overlapped with 24 inches. To get a lot of the tongue and groove in place, you can see us hitting with the sledgehammer this piece of wood here, which we used to knock the upper piece of plywood into the lower, as long as that tongue was in the groove. A lot of the times I had to put my weight on the tongue and then Bruce would hit it in, or vice versa. Working in a team like this helps a lot because I got really good at screwing in the boards and Bruce got really good at cutting the boards. You can run the circle saw straight through for the bird's mouth, but it will weaken the entire board, the 2x8. Using a hand saw to finish that cut perfectly and flush will increase that strength even when you're cutting out the section. These rough cut lumber pieces were super heavy, especially because they were fresh and green. So these are some blocks I made for the rafters so that they're not falling in on each other. This supports them before you're putting on the plywood. I cut these at 9 degrees so that they're running the same slope as the rafters without any interference. In this shot we're throwing on the fascia board. This was easier with the tractor as to ladders, which we used for the backside. The plywood pattern is not consistent, that way there's no seam running up one rafter. This spreads the weight so that it can bear more weight. I would tack the plywood down to the rafter, then we would hammer in the next sheet, then I would go back with a framing square, trace it down, and nail it in. You get pretty good at crawling on top of these rafters after you've been up there a few days. When we were putting on the water barrier, we found that having 3 of us up there was much easier to do a full sheet and get it done all in one shot. It is possible to do it with just 2 people, but we got a lot more seams. Having a piece of plywood as the base landing for those plywood sheets we're handing up was really helpful, so it didn't scratch that water barrier we had just put down. These top sheets you can hit in without wood protection because they're just going to get cut. Here we snap the line and we send the cut straight through. Here I'm marking the sheets on where to drill the holes. I did use a corded drill for this. Then Bruce and I lifted the sheets up onto the roof. You can see the boards went up around the perimeter. This was possible once the roof was shedding water. Once they were up there, we got them square and into position, and then we tacked them in, that way they weren't sliding off the roof. So now I'm just screwing in all the screws that we had up there, making sure not to step on the ribs. We finished by putting the peak sheet on the ridge. Thank you for watching. This is just one way to put a roof on a timber frame. I had a bunch of fun during this and I learned a bunch. Hopefully you learned something. Stick around for another video.